Today, we're talking about something that will make you check your basement before you go to bed tonight. Imagine moving into what seems like the perfect home. A quiet suburban street, a safe neighborhood, a fresh start for your family. But unknown to you, someone else is already living there, hiding beneath your feet, watching your every move, learning your routines. And when the time is right, they strike. This is the terrifying case of the Miller family. A husband, wife, and their two young children who were found murdered in their home. No forced entry, no signs of a break-in, just a hidden crawl space in their basement where someone had been secretly living for months. A shadow that lurked in the dark, waiting. And the most horrifying part? The person responsible has never been caught. What makes this case even more terrifying is how perfectly it represents a true fear we all have. How well do you really know your own home? Are you sure you're the only one inside? It sounds like the plot of a horror movie, but it's real. And we're going to break it down in detail. On January 28, 2024, police in Pleasant Grove, a quiet town where crime was practically non-existent, received a welfare check request. The call came from an elderly neighbor who had noticed something strange. The Millers hadn't been seen for weeks. Their mailbox was overflowing, and worst of all, there was a horrible smell coming from the house. At first, she thought maybe they had gone on vacation and forgotten to pause their mail delivery. But then she realized something was off. The family car hadn't moved from the driveway. The lights inside the house remained in the same pattern every night. And the smell? It was something unnatural. When police arrived, they knocked, but no one answered. They checked the windows, curtains drawn tight. No movement inside. That's when they decided to force entry. The door wasn't barricaded, nothing seemed amiss, until they stepped inside. The first officer to enter later described the scene as something out of a nightmare. The moment the door swung open, the smell hit them like a wall. A putrid, decaying stench filled the air. They moved cautiously through the house, calling out for the Millers. But the silence was overwhelming. Then they found them. Jonathan Miller was in the master bedroom, lying face down on the bed. Cause of death? Blunt force trauma to the skull. He never saw it coming. His wife, Rebecca, was slumped against the hallway wall. The coroner's report later revealed she had been strangled with an electrical cord. And the kids? Emily, 12, and Noah, 9. They were still in their beds, smothered in their sleep. No forced entry, no missing valuables, no ransacked rooms. This wasn't a robbery. It wasn't random. It was personal. But nothing could have prepared investigators for what they found next. When they entered the basement, they noticed something unusual. A wooden panel in the wall, slightly ajar. Behind it, they found a hidden crawl space. And inside, someone had been living there. A filthy mattress, piles of empty food wrappers, bottles of water, and a notebook. A journal, written by the intruder. And that's when they realized the true horror of this case. The person who killed the Millers had been hiding in their home for months. One of the final entries read, "They don't know I'm here. I watch them sleep. I listen to their voices through the vents. Soon, they'll be mine." Let that sink in. This wasn't some random break-in. This was planned. This was someone who had been watching, waiting. What police uncovered in that hidden crawl space turned this from a simple home invasion into something much worse. Someone had been living there, right under the Millers' feet, eating their food, watching them, listening to them. And when the time was right, they killed them. But the biggest question investigators faced was, how did this happen? Because here's the thing. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken locks, no busted windows, no sign that anyone had picked their way in or jimmied a door open. Which means one thing. Whoever was living in that basement didn't break into the house after the Millers moved in. They were already there. This realization made me wonder, how do you live inside someone's house for 3 months without being noticed? I needed to see the neighborhood for myself to understand how a crime like this could go unnoticed. So I went to Pleasant Grove. When I arrived, the first thing that struck me was how normal everything seemed. This was the kind of place where people left their front doors unlocked, where kids rode their bikes freely, where nothing bad was ever supposed to happen. But the moment I saw the Miller house, I felt it. The air was different here. The house itself, identical to the others in structure, felt wrong. Maybe it was just knowing what had happened inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the walls still held something dark. I walked around the perimeter, looking for possible entry points. The basement had no exterior door, meaning if the intruder had come from the outside, they would have had to break in through a window or vent. And then, I found something strange. A small, rusted air vent near the foundation. It was barely noticeable, partially covered by overgrown weeds. But when I got closer, I saw something chilling. Scratches along the metal edges, like someone had pried it open before. Could this have been how they got in? That's when I started asking around. I wanted to know if anyone had noticed anything strange before the murders. And what I found only made this case even more terrifying. One neighbor, an older woman who had lived on the street for decades, told me something that gave me chills. She said the Millers weren't the first family to live in that house. And the family before them, they left after just 6 months. Why? Because they kept hearing noises. The neighbor said the previous tenants had a little boy, 6 years old, who told his parents that the man in the basement talked to him at night. At first, they thought it was just a child's overactive imagination. But then, they started hearing things too. Footsteps, soft whispers through the vents, things moving on their own. At one point, the father even set up cameras in the house, thinking maybe an animal had gotten inside. But the footage? It never caught anything. They called pest control, had the house checked for structural issues, but when nothing turned up, they packed up and left without explanation. And then, weeks later, the Millers moved in. This is where things get truly unsettling. The timeline of this case suggests that the intruder may have been hiding in the house for months before the Millers even arrived. Think about that. The house sat empty for a while before the sale went through. No one was coming in or out. No one was checking. The perfect hiding spot. Then, a new family moves in. And instead of leaving, the intruder decides to stay. One neighbor I spoke to told me Rebecca Miller had mentioned something odd just a few weeks before the murders. She kept losing things. At first, it was little things. Food from the fridge, a sweater she swore she left on the couch suddenly missing. She chalked it up to stress. But then it got worse. One night, she woke up suddenly, feeling like someone was watching her. She told a friend that she swore she could hear breathing. But when she got up and checked, Jonathan was fast asleep. The kids were fine. No one else was there. Or so she thought. Because we now know, someone was there. Listening, watching, waiting. Rebecca Miller wasn't imagining things. She wasn't losing her mind. The missing food, the misplaced objects, the strange noises, these were all signs of something far more disturbing. Someone was already inside her home. But she never got the chance to figure it out. Because one night, that person decided they didn't want to hide anymore. We don't know exactly how the final moments played out, but what we do know is that the crime scene tells a story, and it's a horrifying one. Jonathan Miller was killed in his sleep, his skull crushed by a heavy object. Investigators believe it was sudden, instant. He never saw it coming. Rebecca fought back. She made it out into the hallway, where she was strangled with an electrical cord. That means she saw her attacker. She knew what was happening. And the children? They were smothered in their beds. No struggle, no signs of resistance, just 2 young kids who went to sleep that night and never woke up. There's something deeply unsettling about that. The fact that the killer took his time, that he went room to room, that he made sure there were no survivors. But the most terrifying part? He didn't leave any evidence behind. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. By the time police arrived, he was already gone. The only thing left behind was the journal. The police won't release the full contents to the public, but the excerpts that have been leaked paint a clear picture. This wasn't an act of random violence. This was planned. This was stalking, taken to the extreme. The journal described how the intruder would listen to the Millers' conversations through the air vents, how he would sneak out while they slept, walk their hallways, touch their belongings. One entry read, "The little one sleeps with a stuffed bear. He always reaches for it in his sleep. If I took it, would he notice?" Another entry, days before the murders. "They don't lock the basement door anymore. They've stopped checking. They don't know I'm here." And then, the last entry, "It's time." Think about that. This person spent months inside their home, watching them, learning them, waiting. And then, one night, he decided it was time. It raises a horrifying question. Was this always his plan? Or did he start out just watching and slowly lose control? Experts say cases like this, where a person secretly lives in someone else's home, are rare, but not unheard of. In 2008, a man in Japan noticed his food kept going missing. He set up a hidden camera in his kitchen and caught footage of a woman crawling out of a cupboard. She had been living in his house for over a year. In 2019, a student at Ohio State University kept waking up to find his drawers open and his clothes disturbed. When he set up a camera, he discovered a man hiding inside his closet, sneaking out when he was asleep. And now, in 2024, we have this. But this case is different. Because this intruder didn't just hide. He killed. And the biggest question remains, where is he now? The most terrifying thing about this case isn't just that an entire family was murdered. It's that the person who did it was never caught. No fingerprints, no DNA, no security footage. It's like he was never there. But we know that's not true. Someone lived in that basement. Someone watched the Millers for months. Someone walked their hallways at night, listening to them breathe, getting closer and closer, until one day, they decided to take everything away. And then, they vanished. So where is he now? This is the question that haunts both investigators and anyone who's heard about this case. It's not just about solving a crime. It's about the possibility that this wasn't his first time. And worse, what if it wasn't his last? Think about it. If someone was able to live inside a house for months without being caught, what's stopping them from doing it again? It's not just a theory. Police have been quietly looking into similar cases across the country. Reports of break-ins where nothing was stolen, but people reported hearing breathing in the dark. Homes where food kept going missing. Families who suddenly packed up and left because they didn't feel safe anymore. There's a pattern. And the worst part? This isn't just a ghost story. This happens. There have been dozens of cases where intruders secretly live in people's homes for extended periods. Most of the time, they just hide, steal food, and watch. But what if one of them, just one, decides that's not enough? What if they decide to take over? And that's why this case is so terrifying. Because the Miller family never saw it coming. And right now, someone else could be living their exact nightmare. Right now, he could be inside another home. Watching, waiting, listening through the vents. Just waiting for the right moment to say, it's time. So ask yourself, when was the last time you checked your attic? Your basement? That closet you never open? Because sometimes, the monster isn't under your bed. It's already inside your house. I couldn't leave this story alone. The details were too disturbing, too unanswered. So I decided to go there. To the Miller house. I wanted to see it for myself, to feel the energy of the place, to step inside and try to understand what it was like to be inside that house, knowing someone had been living there, unseen, for months. And let me tell you, it was worse than I imagined. The house has been vacant since the murders. No one wants to buy it. No one wants to live there. The neighbors say they still hear noises coming from inside. The air feels heavy, the kind of weight that makes your stomach drop when you step inside, like you aren't supposed to be there. The front door was locked, of course, but I managed to find a way in. The moment I stepped inside, I felt it. The silence, the cold, the feeling of being watched. The house still had furniture inside. The realtor had been trying to sell it, so they kept it staged. The Miller family's actual belongings had been removed, but there were still pictures on the walls, fake decor, a desperate attempt to make it feel normal. But nothing about this place felt normal. I walked through the hallway where Rebecca Miller had been found. The stains were gone, but the memory of what happened here still lingers in the air. Then I went downstairs, to the basement, to the place where he had lived. I don't know what I expected to find. The police had already cleared it out. The crawl space had been sealed shut. But as I stood there in the dark, something sent a chill down my spine. I heard it, a sound, a quiet, faint tapping. It was coming from inside the walls. I froze. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to run, but I didn't. I listened. The tapping was slow, rhythmic, deliberate. I took a step closer. It stopped. The air was thick with silence again. I told myself it was nothing. The house settling, a pipe shifting, my own paranoia getting the best of me. But as I turned to leave, I heard a whisper, right behind me. 2 words. Still here. I ran. I don't remember climbing the stairs. I don't remember unlocking the door. All I remember is bursting out into the cold air, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I don't know what I heard. I don't know if it was real. But I do know one thing. Something is wrong with that house. And if the killer really did disappear without a trace, maybe he never left at all. This case remains unsolved. No suspects, no arrests, no explanation. The Miller house is still empty, still waiting. Some people say the killer is still out there, that he's moved on to another home, another basement, another family. But I have another theory. I think maybe he never left. I think maybe he's still inside that house, still waiting for the next family to move in. And when they do, he'll be watching, listening, waiting. Until one day, he decides it's time. If you found this story as chilling as I did, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Stay safe, stay aware, and whatever you do, check your basement.